My favorite is the, and this is good for transition to talking about transubstance. Blah, 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 blah.
You were almost there.
I was so close. Gets me every time. Transubstantiate. Nope.
Oh, you were. Transubstantiation.
Yeah, let's just go with that. Is when the kids are like, oh, gross. Does that mean we're eating bodies?
Right.
Are we cannibalists? You're like, no, but it's kind of fun to think of it like this. But no. So
that's an interesting catechetical move. Not really cannibalist, but it's fun to think about.
No, but it's a good way to entice kids into like, okay, but what does it really mean?
Right. Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like so entertainment purposes, now you get all those kids who maybe never thought about that Jesus is really, really present in the Eucharist to what? That doesn't make any sense. Why would we eat a body? And then you get them into further talking about it. So
interesting pedagogical move, right? Like scandalize first and then lead to question that. Sometimes that works, right? But no, it's true. So this is actually what happens in the medieval period. So transubstantiation is not in the Bible as a term, right? It's pretty clear that Christians for the first 900 years believe that Jesus is really present. And they don't need a lot of theoretical language to make sense of this. Then the categories changed in the regnant philosophical categories in the surrounding culture change. And people start asking exactly this question. Is this like cannibalism? And here's the opposite, or is it just a symbol? Right? Which is kind of that community meaning making thing we talked about, right? And the church says neither. Neither of those are going to work. It's not cannibalism and it's not just a symbol. We need to find a way to talk about it now that it's not obvious to everyone, now that the cultural categories have shifted. We need new language to say, how can something be really, really real, but it's not cannibalism? And so transubstantiation emerges in that context. Pardon me.
Oh,
that means that's time for more beer.
Exactly.
Before you start on this story, have a drink. Story goes something like this. A fellow named Berengarius is a famous teacher at Tours in France. And he thinks it's nonsense to say that Christ could be really present in a way other than this symbolic way we've talked about. He gets dragged before a court in Rome, and he's forced to swear this oath, where he has to say, he says things like in the oath, Christ is ground under our teeth, which sounds like cannibalism. And there's an adverb that he has to swear, Christ is present, in Latin, sensualiter, which in English we would say, that doesn't mean sensually like kind of erotic. It means according to the five senses. So Christ could be discerned with your senses. Now that creates a pretty big problem if you've ever actually been to Eucharist, because with very rare exceptions, that's not what happens, right? So then that leads to this strange move, which is we must be deceived. So there's a kind of a veil, like Christ is present sensualiter, but we don't have access to it because to keep us from being disgusted by encountering raw flesh, it's sort of a veil put over it to protect us. Well, this is just not how the church has thought or talked about the Eucharist for, at this point, it's 1,100 years. So Berengarius goes back home, takes back the oath.
Recants.
I was going to say recounts, but no, he recants the oath, says it was sworn under duress, which historians think that's actually probably true.
But I mean, who hasn't sworn under duress?
Yeah.
Come on. Man up.
20 years later, the theological community has had a chance to catch up with him. Berengarius is still doing battle, and he's back in Rome. 20 years later, he's got to swear another oath, and this time there's a new adverb, substantialiter. That means substantially, which enters church teaching, right? Christ is present really, truly, and substantially. And why did that word work? Substance is being recovered at this time, although it's not new in Christian theology. We have the word consubstantial in the creed from several centuries before, with pretty similar meaning, but it's being recovered now in the rediscovery of Aristotle. And substance, according to Thomas Aquinas, is following Aristotle pretty closely, is what is present to the intellect. So sensuality says what's present to the senses, but substance says what's present to the intellect. Now that's really interesting because according to the Aristotelian way of thinking about reality, and I think it has a lot of common sense to it. I think I'm looking at beer, but what do I see? Well, I see a certain color and I see a certain shape, and I can notice a certain feel or texture or a taste or a smell. My senses, all 5 of my senses, I can even hear it being poured. You know, that lovely sound of the can cracking and then foaming up. I can encounter it with all 5 of my senses, but it's my intellect that synthesizes the data from my senses and says beer. I never encounter beer directly with my senses. I encounter the color of beer, the smell of beer, the taste of beer, the sound of beer being poured, but I only synthesize that data with my intellect and recognize that this kind of thing is beer. And when I do that, I'm saying the substance of the thing is beer. So substance is present to the intellect, and it's more real than some of the other stuff. The color could change a bit, or it could, beer can be thicker or more watery. It can be darker or lighter. It could, all kinds of those things can change, and it's still beer. So there's a way in which that reality that's present to the intellect is more real, and that made substance the perfect category because the church wanted to say, this is really, really, really real, and it's not physical or material. And so after substance took hold, it was only a generation before we had the word transubstantiation, which literally just means a change of substance. Substances change all the time, by the way. You and I can change substances. If I light this desk on fire, I can change it from well, let's imagine it's real wood. I can't tell if it is, but if it was wood, I could change it from wood to ashes and smoke and whatever else. But when I do that, I'm also changing the form in which the matter is organized. So we generally call that a transformation. In this language game, transformation is a natural thing. Things transform all the time. Transubstantiation is not a natural thing. Only God can change the substance without the accompanying changes of accidents and form and whatever else. So it's a unique thing. There's no other cases of transubstantiation in creation.